Hey everyone, it's Tuesday, so we talk something pop culture-y. I saw a bunch of movies over the weekend. I saw Disclosure Day, I saw Obsession, because it was a double feature at the drive-in, and then I saw Supergirl, and obviously the title of this video, we're focusing on Supergirl. Because out of the three movies I saw, uh, Disclosure Day was by far the one I enjoyed the least. Now, it hasn't been an amazing box office success, but the reviews on it are way better than Supergirl, and I don't think that's fair. So let's start there. About what the heck happened to Supergirl. The reviews were not fair, and I really think it hurt the walk up for this film. Let me do help support this channel, and then we'll get into it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy the one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Like and subscribe to this channel if you like this content as well. There were some red flags in the reviews. The one from, I think it was Variety, that really set me aback is there's no story. It has no story. It has a bad script. And to me, as someone who enjoyed the movie for what it was, I didn't see a bad script there. I saw some strangely choppy editing. And there were times where the music drowned out a punchline of a joke. The pacing of the dialogue back and forth made it hard to realize that it was a joke. But the idea that there was no story is ridiculous. The story is simple. Crypto gets poisoned by this brigand. Supergirl has 72 hours to save him. That's the story. There is a story. Something happened with the reviews. And I think there's a combination of the same thing that happened with Peter Jackson's King Kong, which is an absolutely beautiful movie, but it was the movie he made after The Lord of the Rings won like 11 Oscars. And sometimes film reviewers put a filmmaker in their place. And it's really not fair to, what's his name, Craig Gillespie, that people are treating Supergirl like it's a James Gunn film. And yeah, it looks a lot like Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's not a James Gunn film. But it is being treated as the follow-up to Superman, even though it's not. More on that in a bit. Obviously, it's the second installment in the DCU. The critics were, people forget how rough the critics were on Superman initially when it came out. Then word of mouth spread, and the review scores improved, but it was definitely word of mouth for that film that got it moving. I don't think there will be as much of that this time. More on why in a bit. But you looked at the reviews, and yeah, the reviews for the sort of established, ongoing, like, newspaper movie critics seem to be a mixed bag, which, yes, it's a movie not everybody's gonna like. It's a movie not everybody's gonna understand. It's a hot mess movie for a hot mess character. It doesn't spoon feed that to the audience, so people are either going to pick up on it or they're going to miss it, and a lot of people are going to have issues where it's just not the movie they wanted to see. But the influencer reviews, you know, a lot of Dale G, Stephanie P, Brad S, you know, which, I don't know, obviously they do regular movie reviews for a website or some sort of YouTube channel, but those were the ones that seemed to be really brutal, except for the Variety review that seemed to go viral. And if you think about films with, there's no such thing as a film with no story. If there's no story, nothing happens. Um, it can take a while to get going. It can be a very simple story. I mean, John Wick, very simple story, doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And the reason I brought up Obsession is it was the double feature at the drive-in with Disclosure Day, and we almost left after the first, say, 25 minutes of that film. It is a slow burn off the top, and the two guys in the beginning of that film are pretty disgusting to me. And I was like, it's a horror movie. It might go somewhere. It might go somewhere. It is a movie that does pick up as it goes along. And Indy Navarrete, who I'd only seen in Superman and Lois as the on-again, off-again love interest for Jordan Kent, she is spectacular in Obsession. Spectacular. I get why everybody's raving about that movie, but you actually have to accept it. You have to accept it for what it is and not make it the movie you want it to be. Now, it's horror, so people are going to be more accepting of that. That has a feel good. This is an upstart young director who is known from YouTube. There's goodwill. A DC film is not going to have that. And the problem with influencer reviews, which I find interesting that Christopher Nolan has said we're not doing that. It's only, and I hate to call it serious film critics, but that's basically it. Like, only established critics. We're not going to do influencer previews. And after what I saw with Supergirl, that might not be a bad idea. Because the problem with these smaller services is that they are going for clicks. And a negative review tends to get more clicks than a positive review. So that is something that everybody's going to have to contend with. And let's face it, the algorithm was already trending negative because people thought Millie Alcock was ugly. And it's interesting. The one thing that everybody agrees on is that she's really good in the part. And my thought is, a bad script doesn't make you like the main character. If you get a sense and you like her by the end, the script was at least mediocre. It did its job in a film that is ultimately a character study. And this is something that drives me crazy about modern criticism, is that a lot of film critics don't actually seem to understand how the component parts of a piece of media work together. And a script is not just dialogue. A script is also the plot and things they change from the original source material. And I admit I was not the biggest fan of the Supergirl arc by Tom King that, and I'm blanking on the name of the artist, but they named one of the planets after the artist, Bilquis, and I thought that was pretty cool. I guess I forget if that's the first or last name. Anyway, Tom King stands out because I'm not saying Tom King is a bad writer. I just don't like his stuff. And the ending I felt was I don't know to the end of that story. They twist it they change it in the film. And I'm trying to avoid massive spoilers, but I really like the change they made. It was challenging. It is going to, not everybody's going to love it. I think it makes Supergirl a more interesting character, and people are describing it as a twist. I absolutely disagree that the big defeat the villain scene is a twist. The film leads up to it. It as we're coming up to it, I'm like, if they don't go this way, if they bail out of what they have set up, I'm gonna be disappointed. And they didn't bail out. They did it. It felt right. It felt like it made sense. It defines Supergirl's particular complex heroism in that she doesn't have the luxury of being as nice a guy as Clark Kent. She has a very different relationship with her Kryptonian heritage. It was much more, she was there. She saw the decline. There is a bitterness and a pain. And what I like is at the end of the movie, she hasn't totally got that all figured out. She figured out what she wants to do with it, and now she's on a journey to do that. I can also see some major issues cropping up between Clark and Kara because they do have very different superhero problem-solving abilities. But none of this was in the reviews. And if any of this was in the reviews, then hey, you can't recognize that the film took you there. It was not a twist. The film was building up to that ending and say it's a bad script. It almost felt like the people writing the reviews went in pretty much knowing what they were going to write with a few details. I'm surprised that I think people just really like Jason Momoa. And so this is moving on to the next point, but I like his Lobo. I like what they did with his Lobo. I was very pleasantly surprised that they did not nerf Lobo's dialogue. But because they didn't, this is definitely not a kid's movie. And when your main competition is Toy Story 5, they may have wanted to sell this as counter-programming a bit more, but it's a super crowded box office. The Toy Story 5 effect is coming. It's definitely not a kid's movie. And obviously that's going to hurt it in theaters because Superman was a film that you could take older children to. This is one of those ones, I know they'd never do it. I think it would have been better to go R rating, or at least like what we'd call, well, our adult accompaniment is R in the US, but it is gritty. The minute you put an authentic Lobo into a world, there's going to be some language that isn't for kids. Lobo does have fake swears, but he is a parody of those grim, dark anti-hero characters that absolutely exploded during the comic book spec market. But even before that, they were, I think it was originally taking the piss out of Wolverine, but a few things got added in. Jason Momoa plays Lobo with this coarse nobility. He is not just doing the same thing he did in Aquaman, and I really liked that. But I think you have to know what's going on with Lobo as a character to sort of get that he's set up as a foil for Supergirl, where they have a lot in common, but they don't have sort of the same starting point. So Lobo's not a good guy. He's not a good person. And the whole point is Kara is. Underneath it all, she actually has a goodness. It's just not the same as Clark's. And if you don't get what's going on with Lobo there, it's difficult. But anything with Lobo, again, is not a kid's movie. I think there's a certain expectation that a superhero movie has to be a kid's movie. But this is also not a superhero movie. It's much more like a space western that Hideo Kojima, of all people, identified. He compared it on, I don't know which social media, maybe Twitter. Sorry, X. But he compared it to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I'm like, damn, I miss that. And that kind of makes the villain not being one of the big DC villains. I also think that hurt the film, by the way, because the villain is more of a device. It's just a rabbit for, pardon the pun, because it's about a dog, a rabbit to chase. It's just an excuse to move the plot along. The villain is a lot of nothing. And I think that was somewhat intentional, but I do think that because of the formula that people expect, there was no Nicholas Hoult to David Corenswet's Superman getting a certain type of viewer invested in this. That was supposed to come from Lobo. And I don't think that that particular kind of route for the bad guy person was going to see this movie because Millie Alcock's not hot enough. And this is going to be a problem that movies catering to comic book fans are going to have to deal with. And it sucks. And I'm not sure what the solution is, other than you're just not going to get them to show up with a female lead. Now, I don't get that. I don't get the sense that that's what they were doing. Because like I said, Lobo is a great foil for Supergirl in this. There's also a kid. She's from the comics, Ruthie, I think the character's name is. I didn't love the kid. But again, I didn't like the original story, which is why I'm surprised I liked it as much as I did. But the kids serve the purpose as another foil for Kara, in that she has that idealistic quest. And they could have punched up the jokes about revenge quests, but I don't think this was the kind of movie that was trying to rely on quips. Again, I'm not sure because the editing was the messiest part about it. But I do think that the plot that they chose, in hindsight, may have been a mistake because it's the Spider-Man 2, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man 2 problem. Anybody who knows what happens in Spider-Man 2, myself included, liked Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy so much we didn't want to see that story. And I think that people didn't want to see a story about a dying dog. And that's fair. Right? That's something to put out at a different time. This would have been a better movie for fall. The fall is very crowded here. Or, like, this was a good movie to put out around March, you know, when films like The 300 came out and did really well. This is not a film that was going to do great in a very crowded summer. I am not sure why this summer was so crowded with movies, but there were too many movies. People don't have the disposable income they did even a year ago. I'm not sure why there's a major release every bloody weekend. Decent movies that deserve to do better are not doing great because it's just so crowded. And the more the summer goes on, the worse it gets. I mean, Masters of the Universe, the marketing, I would have done it differently, but That was an Amazon film. They were just, some of these films they put out that they're primarily expecting it to do well on streaming. I think that was the original plan for Project Hail Mary, and it just blew up, right? I don't think Supergirl is one of those films. I think that it was intended to do decently at the box office, unlike, say, The Sheep Detectives, which was a smaller movie. I enjoyed it for what it was, but it's very dark for a kids movie by today's standards. It felt more like an old school, like 80s kids film where there actually is peril and risk, and not everything is okay all the way through it. But Masters of the Universe is another, I believe, Amazon Studios film, and they expect that to be a streaming thing. You put movies into theaters so that you can spend more on marketing and recoup some of that. Amazon's strategy is working because when they get a breakout hit like Project Hail Mary, amaze, amaze, amaze. But they're spending more on marketing so that people watch their movies on streaming. Supergirl doesn't have that benefit because Warner Brothers has just not, I guess it's going to be a Paramount Plus thing, which, hey, it probably will do a boost for Paramount Plus. But that's the other thing is, are people who want to see a hot mess, not quite girl power movie gonna wanna support something that is now owned by David Ellison? Probably not. Do you see the shitstorm working against this film, other than the obvious mistakes that it made in terms of when to put it out and how they marketed it? I think they kind of knew that it wasn't like, once they saw what they were wedged between, they were all like, okay, we're probably going to get blown out second week by Spider-Man. So let's just keep the budget reasonable and move on to, what is it, Superman Man of Tomorrow? Well, Clayface is the next one in October, and I'm personally stoked for that. But I don't really think they marketed the film that they made. I also think that the film that they made could have used another 25 minutes to help people along about who these supporting characters were, and just a little more structure, a little more building up Kara's relationship with Crypto. But again, it wasn't that the movie was bad. It's that people didn't see it in the first place. Like The Marvels. The Marvels was a super fun movie. I like The Marvels much more than I like the original Captain Marvel. Supergirl is a better movie than the first Captain Marvel movie in general, just because you actually like the main character by the end of it. Captain Marvel was saved by the Flurkin, which is the alien cat. Carol Danvers is just a cipher through that entire thing, and the ending was just pandering. I also liked Supergirl more than the second Wonder Woman film, Wonder Woman 1984, which was just a creep fest. I don't want to see Wonder Woman commit weird body swap dubcon sexual assault. Like, I just don't. I didn't have those issues with the Supergirl film. It was a mess, but it was a mess that eventually went somewhere. I didn't like it as much as the original Wonder Woman, and I didn't have as good time with it as I did The Marvels, but it's not a movie that's intended to be a good time, so yeah. But the thing that I think more than anything just wiped out Supergirl at the box office was the astounding success of Toy Story 5. And I have seen Toy Story 5. It is a great film. Blew me away how they still managed to keep that franchise intensely topical. It deserves all the success it's getting, but it made 159 plus million globally, 70 million domestically on its second weekend. It only had 53% drop off, which by the standards of this summer, because it's so competitive, is low. 70 million domestic in an opening weekend numbers for a film in modern reality. I think they expected it to do well. I don't think they expected it to do this well. It's already over at least 300 million. It's past 600 million internationally. So the entire global run for a super successful movie in this day and age, Toy Story 5 managed in 2 weeks. That is not something they can plan for. I am sure Warner Brothers knew it was going to be a drubbing when they were wedged between Toy Story 5 and Spider-Man. Was it Brand New Day next weekend? But I don't think they knew it was going to be this much of a slaughter. But people are still seeing Toy Story 5. And for kids, it's absolutely the right call. I don't know what they could have done differently with Supergirl other than, it doesn't make any sense to put more money into it when it's going to get wiped out by Spider-Man. The edit could have been better, but there were times that I felt like they might have been doing like janky cuts to avoid more expensive CGI. So, if they were trying to manage the budget, it was only 175 million, which is, still a lot of money. But these superhero films tend to go 200 plus. I do think they have to get the budgets down, but when you're doing these super powered punchy parts, you need the cool. And I do think the parts where she went punchy, the weakest fight was the one that was in all the trailers in the bar. Now, it might have just seemed weak because I saw it in the trailers. I knew it was coming. But the one at the end is legitimately exciting, even with the rough editing. She's got a more brutal kind of feral fighting style than Superman, which again was a cool distinction. The callbacks to Superman, the Superman film, the David Corenswet Superman film, were neat to me. The reason she, reveals the costume finally, that made sense. And it wasn't for big reasons. And it wasn't because she, necessarily terribly believed it. She was, to me, doing it for the kid. And to try to save the kid's soul, so to speak. But the fact that the movie doesn't point out why she's doing certain things was right for the character, but not right for a blockbuster, because unfortunately, in order to get blockbusters, you need the speech explaining why she does what she does, and she is not that kind of character. She is not chatty. She's very closed off. She's nihilistic and breaking character to give the hero speech, that wonderful light bloom lens flare speech between Superman and Lex Luthor at the end that I love, but it's not that kind of movie. She doesn't even understand what she's doing. But every word she says tells you something about her. And that's not a bad script. And I think I'll probably watch it again I won't watch it again when it comes out on streaming because I don't have Paramount Plus. Maybe I'll get the DVD. I don't know. But I suspect I'd pick up more things the second time through. It was a challenging character to write. Um, and I don't know how you meet all the expectations. I give them credit for creating a female character who is different and profoundly challenging and a different kind of good. And I do think that because ultimately she's, out of all the characters I'd compare her to, most like Wolverine when he's written well, which is why Lobo was the right foil for this film, because of course he's a send up of Wolverine when he's written badly. And then of course you've got the kid to play off of as well. But yeah, I just think that a lot of things went against Supergirl. It wasn't the right movie for this summer, when I think people were looking for something more affirming like Toy Story 5. And the reason I say that is in part because remember I said I saw Disclosure Day and Obsession this weekend? We were gonna see it last weekend. There's a drive-in by us. It's actually the drive-in that was on Gen V, the boys spinoff. But that was kind of funny. But it's a really cheap way to see movies because you pay per car, which is cheaper than movie tickets to begin with. But then you get 2 movies, so it's like, oh my god, this is the only way, and it's fun to go to the drive-in. But anyway, we went to see Disclosure Day and Obsession last weekend. And when we got there, we were like, no, we're more in the mood for Toy Story 5 and Sheep Detectives. We just can't deal with more drama right now. We need something lighter. Sheep Detectives was a lot darker than I expected, but, still ultimately ends wholesome. But Toy Story 5 was just a hug of a movie. And Supergirl's not. Supergirl's not just a punch in the face. Supergirl is the story of somebody who keeps getting knocked down and keeps getting back up, and she's not even quite sure why. She's just been going on for so long that she just didn't want to lose the one thing she really has, which is crypto. And everybody loves crypto. So again, I don't think people wanted to see crypto sick. And fair. But apparently that character is going to be in Man of Tomorrow. I'm Supergirl. I'm really interested in that. I'm interested to see more of Jason Momoa as Lobo. Man, it was great. Like, he defined the character, so he wasn't just doing Aquaman again. You gotta know what that character's like in the comics to really get the perfect amount of cheese he was spinning the dialogue with. I expect there will be more from that character with him. But yeah, I'm gonna have a challenge with that, cause right now I ain't paying for Paramount Plus. So DC didn't know they were gonna have that acquisition problem when they started down this journey with the DC universe, and I do think it was smart not to make Supergirl a series, a streaming series, which honestly it was better suited for. But as we've seen, people don't want to do homework to see movies. I think they've got to keep their cinematic universe and their streaming universe or TV universe, because Lanterns is coming out soon, which I'm interested in. But it's the sort of thing where people don't want to have to do homework to know what's going on in a movie. These films have to be standalone for it to work. And I still think James Gunn has a vision. It does seem like he's sort of just making interesting movies that all have their own vibe to them. But people are gonna need time to understand that this is not the MCU, that he's doing something different, and not every movie is gonna be for everybody. But man, am I looking forward to Clayface. That's the takeaway. So, I don't know. It's one of those things. Because will I recommend Supergirl? It really depends. If you are prepared for something messy that does what the reviews I saw on Disclosure Day claimed that movie did, but didn't for me. It claims it sort of all comes together at the end. I disagree. The ending of Disclosure Day is so super disappointing and obvious and predictable. Like, geez, Emily Blunt is great in it, but I feel like I wasted my time. Because it was just, pulling that from Close Encounters. Pulling that from Indiana Jones. There's a shit ton of lens flare. Yep, it's a Spielberg movie. Wow. But I do felt like Supergirl did come together in terms of what the movie was doing at the end. Well, the defeating the villain scene. But that's not going to be for everybody. And it's not your standard feel-good, affirm humanity superhero movie. It's about a girl saving her dog. That's what the movie's about. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Like and subscribe to this channel if you like this content. Thanks for watching.